Hey there, fellow creators. Ben here from Cinder Studios, and you know, there is one color that so many artists, professionals, teachers, professionals who are teachers, on this platform, on other platforms, always say, never, ever, ever use this color in your painting. Get rid of it. Never have any of this color on your palette. You don't want this color. You never want to use this color, ever, 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 ever. That color? Black. But why do people hate it so much? Well, we're going to talk about that, as well as 5 reasons why you probably should have black on your palette. Stick around. So let's start with the obvious. Why do people hate black paint? Why do artists like, no, get rid of black paint, never have black paint, you're never allowed to have black paint, you're never allowed to use black paint, get rid of it, never have any of it? Well, 2 reasons. One, it's mostly advice for beginners, even though there is usually a tube of black in a lot of color theory sets. A lot of people will take black and say, oh, I need to paint shadows. I'll grab black. Or this color is dark. Let's just add black to it to get it dark. So in that sense, it's like, yeah, not having black around when you're really excited to, like, oh, this is dark, it must be black. It's like, it doesn't really teach you how to mix your colors real well. And so for that reason, I think among others, is one of the biggest reasons why people say don't use black, don't use black. But once you kind of get your bearings in color mixing, when you understand the ideas of blues and browns and how to make a good dark and not necessarily a good black, black is a little bit more useful. So whether you happen to buy your black paint in a big jar, in a bottle where it's liquid, or just a tube to have some on the side, it is good to have some around. And let's have a look at what those reasons are that you might want to actually have a tube of black in your studio. The first of these tips is to make really good, complex greens, actually. If you're not familiar and haven't been doing any color mixing for a really long time, you may not know that mixing a yellow with a black gets you a really remarkable green, depending on the yellow, of course. I took 4 of my studio yellow colors and mixed them with my regular Mars black to get all of these varying degrees of sort of dark and light greenness. You don't necessarily need to pick up a blue and mix it with yellow to get a green, especially if you're, again, leaning for realism. If you're doing anything with realism, you tend to want to avoid black, but if you want to mix a complex green, maybe grab the black. The second reason you might want to have black on your palette involves, well, just doing a monochromatic or grayscale painting. Monochromatic being one color plus black and white, or a grayscale obviously being just black and white paint. I mean, you can't make a grayscale painting if you don't have one or the other. So it's like, well, you need to get black for that, or at the very least, a dark gray. A lot of people will interject Payne's gray instead of black. Not saying they're wrong on that sense. Payne's gray is remarkably useful, but personally, I mean, if I have a white and a black, I can get a gray pretty easily. Third would be any kind of graphical illustration or cartoon work. I mean, let's be honest, not everyone who picks up a brush is going to be painting realism. The vast majority of people, I would say, probably aren't in the grand scheme of things. So using black as an outline, so it may not necessarily have to be in a tube, but you might think, you know, graffiti and street art, using black spray paint, paint marker in particular, to do outlines on characters. I would say especially outlines on characters. Here's a few examples from my friend Cam. Had my big Splatter Worlds exhibit at his gallery this past summer, and all of his works really require that thick, bold outline to show the definition in his characters, and I honestly wouldn't expect him to do that with anything other than black paint. The fourth reason you might want to have black is to desaturate some of your colors. Now, I will say that you definitely could overdo this. It's one of the other reasons why a lot of artists will say, oh, never use black, because it can make your colors muddy very, very quickly. But if used sparingly, you can really kick back the shade of that color to really make something that is, in many ways, can be more realistic by just adding a little sliver, a little hint of black into that. You don't have to use a ton of it, but enough, like in my example with the yellows, to just change that color enough to really desaturate it down, or even to change the hue. And the fifth and final reason why you might want to have black on your palette is to do things that you might associate with other media. In this case, I would say it's mimicry of other styles and techniques. With a thin enough black paint, you can do basically pen and ink dip work, but instead of using ink, you can use the thinner paint. It's a great way to explore different techniques with maybe the same media that you're used to without necessarily having to go out and get the ink or have to go out and get the watercolor, for example. You can use similar techniques that you would with other media with the same black paint that you would otherwise have for other projects. So if you want to mimic some other styles, I would say specifically with ink, black acrylic can do that too. And there's a side extra sixth, fifth and a half one, airbrushing, spray paint, some stuff like that. Any kind of a mist application, that's a whole other realm of things you could probably need black paint and probably should have black paint for in those circumstances. So those are my 5 reasons why you probably should have black paint in your studio. Now again, I'm not saying to use it all the time. Don't grab it for every shadow you happen to have. If you're going for realism, learning to mix something like a blue and a burnt umber or a raw umber to get a nice complex dark chromatic black. See more in this video over here on chromatic blacks. But there's a sense of color mixing where you need to know that without grabbing the black. But once you do know that, it's like, okay, now I do want the black because I do know where I can use it and use it more effectively. But what about you guys? I'm sure I'm not alone in thinking that I'm the only artist on YouTube that's going to be using black paint. What do you guys specifically use black paint for? Or are you one of those artists that has sworn off black paint from an early part of your career and like, I'm never going to pick up black paint again? Has anything I talked about today inspired you to maybe pick up a tube of black again and say, let's see what this can do with color mixing? Regardless of your situation though, let me know your thoughts in comments below regarding using black in your paintings. And as always, if you enjoyed this, learned something, or just like hearing me talk about art supplies, go ahead and hit that like button, get subscribed if you're not already. Check me out in the social links in the description box below, including the community Discord, as well as the sign up for my newsletter on my website. And this has been Cinder Studios reminding you to keep on creating, and I will see you guys next time. Almost perfect. Little bit of stumble on the social links, but almost perfect.